Seshadri. I'm a squash pro currently at the Harvard Club of New York City. I came from India about when I was 19 or 20 years old for university. I started playing squash when I was 16. My family background is all about playing tennis. Having shifted from Bombay to Chennai in India, what happened was the National Squash Center was there, and I was definitely much more, how would I say it, energized going towards squash and starting a new sport. And it just happened so that the world's best players would come and train out there, and I love the sport. I told myself, you know what, I'm going to use this to my advantage and try and get as good as I can. I played in the pro circuit for a little bit. My brother was already here in New York City, and he told me about the option about coming to university out here. And never would I have ever dreamt of coming to university out here if I didn't get a scholarship. And I didn't know squash could be used as a ways and means to get out here as well, besides your education. So yeah, when I was 19, I moved to Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Went to a small school called Franklin Marshall College, which recruited me. And I played number 1 and 2 in my first 2 years out there. It's amazing how squash has done wonders for my life, because my journey all started with squash at the age of 16, I would say, and having coming to the US has been great because it helped me get into college, and now currently my job also involves me playing squash.
Okay, so I mean, I love this story, and you and I were chatting over dinner about this, and whilst we've been mates for a long time, this is the first time I actually knew the full story behind how you got here. But I just want to dive a bit deeper into a few different areas in that. So let's go back to the very beginning. Your family was a tennis family. Your dad was pretty damn good from what you told me, and it was something like during the winter months or something like that, you wanted another sport, and you was like...
It was basically during monsoon season. So in Bombay, right, we would have heavy rains, and we never had indoor tennis courts. And there would be months where we just didn't play tennis, or we would play tennis, but it would be very sporadic.
Yeah.
And just playing squash for fun it's amazing, because in tennis you wait for the ball, in squash you go to the ball more often. And it was just an amazing burst, just moving around, the energy, the intensity, and it just got me going.
So in terms of the difference between tennis and squash, like as soon as you started playing squash, did you know actually this is my sport, or how did that happen?
In a way, I would say. I think I also was kind of burnt out playing a lot of tennis, because I started tennis very early, but I would say at 6 or 7, and playing from 6 or 7 to 16 and playing competitively, I was a nationally ranked junior tennis player. It just kind of got bored. I wanted something different, and it was squash that came into my life, and I was like, I love the run, I love the movements, I love the hustle, and more than anything, the sweat. When you're in this box out here, you just feel like a completely different animal.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own way of feeling, fit. This is my center of fitness right here. So.
And it is Sats run me round, and it is certainly one way to stay fit. I was absolutely shattered. I could barely walk the next day. So how was your dad when you said, you know what, Dad, I'm actually you were probably playing both sports for a while, but at some point you probably made the switch 100%.
Right.
To squash as your main sport. How was your dad?
To be honest with you, we come from a very sporting family, and as far as we were playing sports, I think my parents were convinced that I'm on the right path. And I think having my brother out here definitely helped, because he made it very clear that he used sports as a segue to get into the United States, to college education, and I never dreamt of it because I never had good academic grades. But he told me, look, buckle down, and you can try and get good grades and try and focus on getting a higher ranking, and then see if any college coaches want you. So coming back to your question, how was your dad think about it? In the long term, I think he's happy, because squash in a way got me here in the United States, and I'm much happier where I am right now because I'm doing something I love and it's a passion.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, so your brother gave you the impetus to actually have a crack at maybe getting to the US into a college position. How old were you when you started to think, actually, this could actually be something that is going to really change my life and change the trajectory of my life?
Right. I would say, coming to, I was definitely much older than normal freshmen. People come here when they were 17, 18. I came in as a 19 or 20-year-old. So I already took like 2 gap years, playing squash. But it was such a new experience. I was fresh off the boat. That's the line they say out here. And coming all the way from India, never being in the United States was an experience by itself.
Yeah.
And then going to university and learning that academics and sport play such a big role out here, because if you follow a little bit of the NCAA, which is the National College Athletic Association, you have so many different sports: football, squash, tennis, rugby starting to get in there. So yeah, it was quite eye-opening for me, because I didn't know how serious they took it, but they did take it very seriously, because obviously they recruited me for a reason.
Okay, so you work your butt off for 2 years, you get the scholarship, you're on the plane. Tell me about those first couple of 2 weeks getting to the US and arriving at college.
Yeah, so I'm going to be very honest with you, and I'm not embarrassed to share this, because my family actually had a very bad financial setback, and I think having my brother here, it was very helpful, because he paid for my flight ticket to come here and get this education and use squash and see where it goes from there. So I as a kid at 19 years old or 18 years old, you don't realize the pressure financially, because you have a support system out here, but my parents definitely felt the pinch. But they were happy to see me leave India, because I was going to something much more important and focusing on my career now, So getting that education and playing squash was obviously very helpful. But I would say after graduation was when the real pressure started, because you come to real world and you come to, okay, now you need to get a job, and what are you going to do? And everybody went to finance, went to advertising. The typical Indian taboos were become a doctor, become an engineer. I had a lot of my friends in finance, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And coming to New York City, I found this organization called Street Squash, which helped inner city kids in Harlem. And what they did was they helped kids play squash, but the ultimate goal was to get an education and combine both those together and get them into college. And it's always something I've been passionate about, helping kids. And I said, you know what, let's just start out here and see how it goes. And I fell in love with the program. I worked there from 3 years, from 2007 to 2009, so 7, 8, and 9, all 3 years combined. And it just so happened where, financially I need to make a decision about the next chapter in my life. And the job at the Harvard Club opened up. And I still love squash, and I still play squash. So that's been very, very important to me, So coming back to your question is, I think squash has been everything for me. A lot of people have different entrepreneurial ideas and ways to move about their lives. I've used squash to be my entrepreneurial idea and, try and make the most out of it. Whether it's helping kids and improving their life skills or character skills, or just getting them into college, or just even playing recreationally, because I think playing competitively, you lose transition about not everybody is here to become a champion. Some people are here just to learn the sport and get an exercise.
Yeah, and that's certainly me, and I think it's one of the greatest exercises you can do, and incredibly fun, and a great new thing that I'm trying to learn. But going back, so I want to dive really deeper into the street squash in a little bit, because I think it's really interesting to me, and maybe relates to how squash changed your life, and you're trying to do that for others. But first off, you arrive, your English was already pretty good, you told me.
Right.
But what was it like going to suddenly being in the NCAA, pressure? I'm sure the training was different. I'm sure the entire way that the game operated was at a different. Not sure about a different level, but it's just totally different. So just talk about that for a bit.
So it's interesting you brought up that question, because here's a funny story which I think this is going to fit really well out here. And it's I come right fresh off the plane, just land out here. My brother comes to pick me up at JFK. No clue, never been to America. Immigration officer asked me, "What are you here to study?" And I didn't know what to say. I literally flummoxed, and I was just quiet. And I go, business. And he goes, "Yeah, what kind of business?" And I go, "Economics." And he looks at me, I look at him, and I'm like, oh man, did I say something wrong? Mind you, come off a long flight, and I'm just literally so tired. I thought I just completely had a brain fart, and he just smiled and stamped my visa and let me go through. And brother comes, picks me up in New York City, first time, amazed by all the big buildings. It's literally like a dream, you know. But having grown up in Bombay, I've definitely seen big buildings and everything. But what really got me was the infrastructure and the cleanliness. You know, coming from India, we're definitely a developed country now in a slower scale. But when I left in 2003, the cleanliness and all was just appalling, you know. And it's still appalling, but we're getting there. So coming back to your question about, you know, what really got me was the trains, the plane, the cars, just everything, the highway. I think, you know, just the space. There was so much space, and you talk about how everything is not congested, because in India everything is so congested, and coming to New York City, seeing there's so much space, and, you know, just driving from here to Pennsylvania was an experience by itself. And funnily enough, you know, F&M, Franklin Marshall, did a good job of having a good international class. So we had about 55 kids from all over the world, and we had 9 other Indian kids in my class. So it was good, you know. The first week was an international orientation, met some Turkish people, Bulgarians, people from Ghana, Senegal, just all over the world, you know. And it was it's amazing what a good job they did to, you know, assimilate you into the program, because the week after was all the American kids come in, and your class comprises of 550 kids, and you're like, poof. And I'm here in a small town in Chennai, India, and I'm like right now in a college which is relatively smaller compared to, you know, Michigan or the bigger schools like UCLA. But for me, it was definitely eye-opening. And one of the funniest things that happened to me was my first class was an English class, English literature class, that is. And the professor goes, okay, you got to write a paper on this book which we had to read over the summer, and it had to just be a 1-page summary. So I'm back home, I'm used to writing on a piece of paper, literally on a piece of paper. So I write my essay, or whatever you want to call it, 1-page summary on a piece of paper, and go to class the next day. And I'm sitting down and looking around me, and everybody has these nicely typed out, mind you, I've never used a computer properly in my life, right, at this point, has typed out computer paper. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, am I done something wrong? And I give it to the professor, and the professor starts laughing, and he goes, hey, look, like, I appreciate your honesty out here, but I want a written paper on a computer, like, you know, nicely typed. And I go, I don't have a computer. And he goes, oh, we have a computer center out here. So I didn't even realize that, you know, and that was my first rookie mistake. But it was amazing that, you know, people were so welcoming and giving you the second chance. You know, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get an F in this class already. And he helped me out, you know, classmates helped me out, and little did you know, my first computer was bought after my freshman year, because I saved up enough money to get that. But yeah, that was you can see the whole transition, you know, coming from India and coming here was quit eye-opening.
And was it you said you were one or two at Franklin Marshall?
Yes,
right?
That's right.
And so was that super competitive to get that spot?
Yeah, coming back to playing, what number did I play on the lineup? I would say playing 1 and 2 was tough, because you had 9 spots and you had about 16 people competing, and the coach would always take 11 or 12. And I played at a high level in India, so I definitely did well. My freshman year, I competed with a former world junior player who played at F&M, so him and me kept going back and forth. And he was a senior, so there was definitely a lot of animosity, you know, like a freshman walking in and taking his spot. But I think we got along well. You know, there were times when he would get ahead of me, and then I would get ahead of him. We'd play 16 matches to 18 matches a season. We'd go all over, go to University of Rochester, St. Lawrence, Pennsylvania, Cornell in Ithaca, Dartmouth, you know, Harvard University, Williams College. And you know, it was really interesting to see that, you know, you have a chance like this to go and travel and play with a team, but also then get an academic education. So yeah, that was very important.
You would have seen a lot of the US as well.
Oh yeah, I would say definitely a lot of the Northeast, but not really the West Coast. But having graduated from college, I've definitely had the opportunity to go and see the rest of America.
Okay, so you finish your time at Franklin Marshall, and you need to get a job, get into the real world, and earn a living. And firstly, what brought you to New York City?
You know, having my brother live in New York, I think it was definitely helpful, like, you know, having some kind of family. And I was also very enamored by New York City, coming during my breaks during university or college, what do you call it here is just, you know, Christmas break and Thanksgiving. And I was just absolutely enamored by the city lights, the snow in the winter season, the parks. Everything was so fascinating to me. You know, I always wanted to live in a big city. And I think, you know, having met a lot of the Australian crew definitely much later in my life, they could connect and tell you as well. You know, everybody comes to New York for a reason. It's definitely a cultural melting pot, and I would say it brings people together. You know, so I would say one of the main reasons was definitely the lifestyle, but also making new friends and starting a new chapter in my life.
Yeah, nice, and certainly I feel exactly the same way, and it's what's brought myself and my wife here. But then you choose this job at Street Squash, and of course you needed to earn a living, and perhaps that was, of course, part of the motivation. But talk about why you started working at Street Squash.
Yeah, so one of the main reasons I worked at Street Squash was, you know, seeing the kids. They came from Harlem and they came from really rough backgrounds, and I related with them because I didn't come from a very well-off family. I would say we had access to a country club in American terms, but when I say country club back home, it's not really the rich and the glamorous. It's, you could get a sporting membership, and my parents managed to get that, and we definitely had everything back home. I wouldn't complain, but the people from Harlem, the kids especially, came from much rougher backgrounds. And I told myself, you know, I said, I want to give myself a chance to try and see what I can do and what impact I can make to the community. And you know, I learned a big thing in life, that you'll always come across 2 or 3 people who are going to be life changers. And one of them was my ex-boss, George Polsky, who started Street Squash. You know, he was a great mentor, and he talked a lot about everybody needs to do their part in the community, you know, whether it's the smallest thing or the biggest thing, whether it's giving money, whether it's actually physically helping out, or whether it's just being there as a support system or a mentor. And seeing these kids and learning about their lifestyle, and you know, most of these kids have never even traveled past 110th Street below. I mean to say, you know, they all live above 110th Street and the Bronx. And it's a completely different world for them, you know. It's definitely changed for the good by programs like Street Squash and, you know, Harlem Youth and Access and all. There are multiple nonprofits which are doing a really good job there. So why did I work at Street Squash? I would say, you know, to make some impact and change people's lives. I think that's one of the most important things for me.
Great. And tell us a little bit more detail about what Street Squash does.
Yeah, so Street Squash's mission is to help at-risk youth who come from, you know, tough backgrounds, who do not have access to good after-school programs. And Street Squash is basically an after-school program in Harlem. They have an amazing 8-court squash facility, but more importantly, they have a library and 4 classrooms. And what they do is, kids come there right after school, about 150 kids on any given day. They study, use education, they have an academic director, and half of them will play squash. And then after 45 minutes they'll switch, the other half will do their studies, and then they'll come and play squash. So every hour and a half there would be a different class coming in. It's definitely changed now. They've changed the model a little bit with what days kids come in and how they can use the support system. They also do college visits. And the end goal, as I said earlier, was, you know, getting these kids into college, because really and truly the program's name says it all as well. You know, Street Squash is like, you keep them off the streets and good things will happen. And I think that's very important for people to realize, for people from that background who don't have access to sports and academia, you know. And
just really quickly, give an example of 1 or 2 success stories that's come from Street Squash.
Oh yeah, so when I started, not even one kid, forget Street Squash, I would say very, very few kids had even gone into good colleges. And now we have over 15 or 20 alumni who graduated from my program, Amherst, Cornell, Bates College, and these are programs which are very tough to get in. You know, you have $60,000 to $70,000 a year education, and half of these kids can't afford that. And thanks to, scholarships and recruitment processes, these guys are getting that opportunity. So I would say that's the biggest thing, just good things are happening when you go to a system like this and you graduate from a college like that, and they get into the real world with, challenging jobs, and they can be competitive and compete with just everybody else who has the same chances.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. I really love what you guys are doing there. Okay, so from there you then went on to, you're still working there part-time on weekends, but you're the squash pro at the Harvard Club of New York City.
Yeah.
But which I'll ask you about in a sec, but you've also started what I would call the Indian version of street squash, Kaushala. Just tell us a little bit about that.
So I told you earlier that there were 3 people who made an impact in my life and changed my life, and one of them was another person named Satinder Bajwa, who was Harvard University's men's and women's head coach. And I used to work at his summer camps to make supplemental income during college. And he finished his tenure out there, I think in 2009, and went back to India and took a risk to start pretty much the street squash, which is called Kaushala. He basically, took the risk, opened a facility in Chandigarh with, I think, 2 squash courts, and he had about 60 kids. Now imagine putting 60 kids in 2 squash courts. And I had the chance to go out there in 2014 and go visit the facility, and I said, you know what, I want to get on board Baj. His name is Baj, sorry, it's short form. I said, how can I get involved? He said, we need shoes, we need squash rackets, we need balls. I said, I'll go further. I said, how about we start a junior board back in New York City, because we have so many Indians who actually come here and use squash and tennis or other sports to get into university. And Baj has been instrumental in recruiting a lot of these guys, So I said, let me give back out here and do my part, where I started a youth board, and our idea was to raise monies for Kaushala and help their program. And right now we're 10 years in, and funnily enough, we're doing our 10th year anniversary on September 25th in New York City with a goal to raise $100,000. We're almost halfway there. And it's interesting because what's happened in the last 2 weeks, which I didn't know about, was we have 2 kids from Kaushala who've probably never even gone outside Chandigarh, are coming to New York City, pending their visa gets approved. So, I'm really excited for that, because these are the 2 kids who were in the first year of Kaushala and have been in the program since, I want to say 3rd grade, and have graduated university back in India and are getting a chance to come here to see colleges. So, you talked about my journey, but I wanted to let you know, these kids who are coming, their journey is going to be phenomenal, because these kids have literally never stepped outside of, Chandigarh or done anything crazy or even traveled. So I think they'll be more excited than I am to see them. So
that's amazing, mate. And big congrats and kudos to you for put the effort in to do that and give back. Okay, now quickly just give us a rundown of your time at the Harvard Club.
Yeah, and this comes back to my 3rd person who helped me in my life, and that's my current boss, Richard Chin. He is absolutely a savior. He's been great. He gave me a chance. It just happened that I needed to make some more money, and you know how New York City lifestyle is. At some point, you need to make a tough decision, and the job at Harvard Club was open. He interviewed me, got me a job out here, and it's completely a 180, because here you're working with kids in Harlem who have very little access to any means to pay for a squash lesson. And now I'm at Harvard Club, where there are people who can afford this, and I can be of use to them and help them get to the next level. So yeah, it's been 10 years now at the Harvard Club, and it's been an amazing ride, because we had so many kids graduate from here and gone to Harvard University and other top programs. And a lot of my kids, I'm still in touch with them. They've been really good, and I've hopefully been a good mentor to them, and taught them a little bit about giving back, because I make sure a lot of my kids help out each year in a street squash fundraiser, and it's called the Street Squash Junior Cup, and we raise a lot of money to help the street squash after school program. Yeah. So, being in Harvard, it's amazing. Being at the Harvard Club rather, it's amazing that you have access to all these means, but it's also how you utilize them, and make some changes in your own small ways and means you can.
Yeah, it's really cool the way you've designed that and sort of were on the ground helping, but now using your influence in high society in New York City at the Harvard Club to give back in a different way. When you're playing squash at a high level and you're in a state of flow and you know exactly where that ball's going to be and you're running and know where your opponent is and all that kind of stuff, what does that feel like?
Interestingly, when you're playing squash, your time to make a decision is very minimal because you're running at such a high intensity, and that split-second difference can make your opponent go the wrong way or you make the correct decision to, win the point, So I think coming back to a life scenario, being in New York City, if you take a full circle and you look at life, it makes you definitely more competitive, but at the same time, it equips you well to deal with the nuances and challenges of daily life. So I think the biggest thing squash has taught me as an individual is how to deal with the everyday circumstances. And of course, it can be good or bad. And there are many times, trust me, when it's bad, but running on this court takes away all my worries. Literally, it just takes me back to my happy place.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Let's go to challenges. So, what are the biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
So as you get older, playing squash becomes much tougher on your body, just like any other sport which requires a lot of movement, and I've had my fair share of injuries, and I know friends of mine who played at a higher level and have had worse injuries. So overcoming those battles, I think, has been the most challenging experience in my life. For example, I pinched my nerve on the right side of my neck, and it's been shooting pain between my neck and my lower back. And if you ask anybody who's had back injuries, it's a nightmare. But it comes back to being mentally tough. I think mental toughness is very important in this game, but also teaches you about your character. How do you overcome these obstacles? You'll have some tough times talking to friends about your problems and how do you move on from them, but squash has definitely taught me how to deal with that. I would say that's one of the biggest takeaways for me as an individual for squash, because you live in New York, which is such a dynamic city, which is already competitive, and you have everybody trying to one-up each other. And so I think squash has kept me grounded. Not many people can say they play a sport for a living and have a good time doing it. So I've had my ups and downs, but I would say the injuries were definitely the most challenging part of this journey for me, because I recently hurt my ankle. That was another one, and and again, when I talk about being injured, I can't play. So when I can't play, I'm not in my happy place.
Okay, I want to dive a bit deeper on the mental toughness piece, because I think that's really interesting. Is that something that you proactively think you can learn, or that you learned, or is it something that you developed just naturally over time? Like, how did that mental toughness with the game come about?
Oh, amazing question. I'm still facing it right now, and I read books on it, and I always ask myself, are people born with this trait? You think about people going to the Marines or the Army, and then you look at the person who's in finance and ads, and look at the person who's playing sports and has to sacrifice so much, right? So for me, it's been a process, for sure. It's mental toughness is one thing which I learn each day. I also read a lot of books, try and sharpen my skills and try and understand it. But it's still a challenge, because I always look back and ask myself, why am I not tough enough? Or, why can't I handle this situation? Am I not strong enough to handle it? But it comes down to, the process and the amount of time you put in to get to where you are. And it basically really comes down to practice for me in squash, right? If I need to get better in my game, I need to create that muscle memory and those repetitions and the time to get better. And the same aspect comes to mental toughness, which is, if I need to get mentally tougher, I need to figure out a way about how am I going to get there. It could be the smallest things. Creating good habits, is one of them. Trying to sleep early. Living in New York, it's not easy, but when you get older, you have to make some choices, and I think I've started doing that, so that definitely helps. And of course, your social aspect, which is the toughest part, because when you work hard and you sacrifice already so much in your life with the sport, you want to have a good social angle to living in the city, and appreciating everything you have. So it's a great balance, it's interesting.
That's a nice analogy, actually, like in terms of everyone's got a framework that you apply to getting better at a certain skill, in your case squash, but you've actually developed a framework that you apply to the mental toughness element of squash, not just the hitting the ball against the wall element.
Yeah.
Cool. And in terms of challenges that someone is new to the sport, new to this journey is likely to face, what are some of those challenges, and what can you recommend for people to get through them?
So one of the things I've realized just coaching at the Harvard Club here alone is, there are so many members who come in who graduate from college and get into finance jobs and ads and think about what doctors, and they don't know what they want to do with their life, after they graduate. So they want to play a sport, but they don't know how long they want to play it for. But they want to get good because they want to get fit, So what I would say is everybody wants to get good too fast, but they don't want to do the process, right? So it's just like anything else, you got to try and put in time and work your way up.
So don't cut corners, just like...
There's no shortcuts,
Yeah.
You hear these sayings in like a lot of different books and people and talking to you about life, and there are no shortcuts. It really is true, because you have to put in time, unless you're naturally gifted and you're super talented in squash, which is very hard, by the way. There are very few people who can do that, just like any other sport.
Cool. And it's a good segue to probably what helps with that is good habits. What are some good habits that someone can put in place that are going to really help their squash game develop?
So one of the biggest things I'm a proponent of is stretching before you play, because what happens is it's the best analogy I give people is like you go to gym and you do leg day and you lift heavy weights. You do it for the first week and then you're just done. You can't do it and you hate leg day and you'll never do legs again, right? Same thing happens with squash. It's if you don't stretch, your body gets sore, and you don't want to play again because you really can't move, right? So I would say the two biggest things is stretching and just lots of practice, even if it's whether it's hitting the ball by yourself, which we call solo work, and creating muscle memory and repetition.
And so in terms of what that actual framework would look like, you said stretch before every game or every time you practice probably as well. Is that just like a once a week solo hit? What did you call it? Solo work?
Solo work.
Once a week?
It depends what your aspirations are, right?
Yeah.
If you really want to get good and move to the next level, it's about playing more. If you just want a good sweat, I would say you play twice a week, and get that workout. But I've been in New York long enough to see Barry's boot camp and all these Soul Cycle, and I'm not trying to be biased. Squash is the best thing. It is by far the best workout you can do, because it works all parts of your body and it's fun. It's a good pain. That's what I like to say.
I mean, that's exactly right. I love it because you don't feel it.
Right.
I mean, you feel yourself sweating and of course getting tired, but you're just focused on the game. You're not focused. You're not sitting there going, "Oh gosh, when is this going to end?" You're sitting there going, "How do I win the next point?" Okay, so I want to talk about squash's impact on your identity, how you view yourself, and I think, and I'm looking forward to diving deeper on this because we haven't yet. But what's interesting to me about you and your identity with squash is that whilst it's been such a big part of your life, I don't think I knew you were a squash player and had been on this squash journey at all until I'd known you for a number of months. And so it's not something that you outwardly talk about very, very much in your peer group. But obviously it's a huge part of your life. So I just want to, ask you about.
Yeah, I mean, being in this city, a lot of people have their social circle and cliques, and never anybody has asked me where you work. That's the best part about it, because they always see me as a fun guy going out and having a good time. So when I tell them I'm a squash pro, it's like, what? Yeah, it's fascinating. That's what my identity is, squash coach. I'm going to call myself a squash coach. I'm proud of it. I enjoy it, and I think more than anything else is, I would think I'm like a teacher, because I make impacts in people's life. One of the biggest things I've realized about squash is when I initially started coaching out here, I was trying to make everybody a good player, trying to make them like better and better. But over the course of the years, I've realized not everybody's here to become a squash champ, right? And I think a lot of them are just here to learn. But it's not only about learning how to play squash, It's also about teaching kids the correct habits and what's right and what's wrong in the world. You know, a lot of kids out here feel they're entitled, so I have to make sure that I put them in line. And you know, sometimes it means, you know, talking to them directly and to their parents and being stern about what my principles are and how I think that, you know, it's important that they carry these principles in their life as well. I'm not trying to change them, but I try to give them a little bits of advice and try and see, you know, how I can make a little bit of change in whatever little positive way it could be, you know.
It's more mentorship than just a pure,
exactly.
You know, this is how you play a backhand.
Right. If it's like basic things like saying thank you or holding the door for someone or like not leaving the water faucet on, you know, the most minute detail, or not throwing your glasses or your racket on the court, you know, these small things I've realized have been more important to me, because being here for 10 years, I've gotten older and I've had kids who've gone to college and graduated and who are one of my starting students out here and come back to me and be like, hey Sat, thanks man, you were great. Like, you know, you helped me so much. Forget about squash, but you helped me about, you know, you taught me some life skills. And to me, that is the most important identity which I have, because I look back at this 10 years from now, or even currently now, and think back at this as like, you know what, I might not have made them a good squash player, but I definitely helped them in their life and, you know, taught them something which helps them and makes them more effective as a leader or a person in society.
I love that, mate. Okay, now final section, the quick fire. Favorite book or movie?
Oh, favorite book, Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway.
Nice one, yeah, great book. Favorite travel destination?
Oof, this is tough because I really haven't traveled too much, and you know, does it have to be where I've been or where do I want to go?
Let's go either.
You know what? I'm going to say Australia. I have all my Aussie friends out here and I've been dying to go out there, so this is something I'm really hoping I can do sometime in the near future.
I think that's a good goal, because I'm sure you've heard us all talking about different places many times. Okay, next travel destination, if it's not Australia. Have you got anywhere?
I would say the Caribbean.
Nice.
Somewhere in the Caribbean.
Top 3 resources for somebody starting this journey.
Squash journey?
Squash journey.
Oof. Fitness. You got to be fit. You got to be dedicated, because if you're not dedicated, you can't play the sport. And number 3, I would say, is mental toughness. Mm-hmm. Comes back to what we talked about. You know, it could be the most smallest thing, but mental toughness.
Excellent. Favorite place for you to relax and chill out?
Greenpoint, Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Barge.
Nice, love it. And oh yeah, favorite place to work on your craft? Favorite place for you to play squash?
I love traveling and playing squash, and I think I would say Barbados. We used to go there for a tournament every year. It was amazing. You get to play squash, you got to go hang out on the beach, and then you come back and play squash and then drink more.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Last question, if you were to write a book, what would that book be about?
Great question. I always look back in life and I tell myself that, you know, I'm going to be a writer one day, because my grandfather was a poet, and you know, everybody has a biography in their life where they talk about things, and I already have the name of the book. It's going to be called The Late Bloomer, and it's been about something about a journey of my life, about how I came to the US and had these opportunities, and hopefully the next 10 years of my life make me even happier from where I am, you know, and just talk about opportunity. So I would say The Late Bloomer would be about that. That would be the book.
I'm looking forward to seeing that on the bookstores and reading it myself. Man, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, man. Anytime. Thanks for doing this.